All right, everyone, there's another report on sort of the cable ratings, the cable rankings, bearing out exactly what I said on two different fronts. First and foremost, CNN suffering a relatively massive year-to-year ratings drop. They're losing like a quarter of their audience. I think it was specifically, network was, I've got a quote here. Network was down 30% in total primetime viewers and 23% in total day viewers from last year. That's pretty big. I would think that, if I were to suddenly lose 23% of my audience, or 30% of my audience, my videos started getting that many fewer views, or that many fewer people were subscribed to me in the course of just a year, I would be panicking. I would think, well, the gig is probably up. I'm obviously doing something wrong. Let me figure out what that is. Let me do a little bit of testing here, ask somebody's advice. What can I do to improve the situation? CNN, of course, doesn't think so. They are actually withdrawing, and that's the other part of it. They are withdrawing on the online world. See, they're dying on cable. The reason why they're dying is the pool of people watching cable news is shrinking. The number of people that actually watch cable is decreasing over time. The audience, because the older generations watch the most TV, and Gen X watches less, post-Jackass, what's there to watch? So Gen X watches a little bit less than the boomers, and then the millennials watch far less than Gen X, and then Generation Z, it's like, what's television? So, cable is having problems, and all of these groups, what they're trying to do is to branch out into the online world. CNN can't even do that. They had nice stats thing there. He pitched some proposal to them. I can't remember what it was, and it was a top-level sort of web project, and they canceled that. They've reduced their staff. They've reduced their expectation of their online growth significantly. And it's going to get to the point, look, somebody was putting out some numbers yesterday, and they're like, Sticks, are you bigger than CNN? I'm like, no, not yet. But the thing is, as a single individual within some of those slots, yeah, probably I'm pulling in as many views as, some of these major cable networks. And there are people on YouTube, yes, they are bigger than CNN at this point. Their total day-to-day audience is probably bigger than CNN, or damn close to it. At the very least, it'd be as big as some of their primetime slots. And just think, there are thousands of people at that level just on YouTube. That's just one website. It's a big one, but there are other sites where people can get popular. There are people who they put out a tweet and 1 million people will retweet it. There are people that have a Facebook page with 5 million followers. Now, Facebook is dying too because it's sort of like, the most boring social media site ever possibly concocted. It's a little more in the data mining operation at this point anyway. Zuckerberg's just like, oh, well, this is going to suck, isn't it? I think I'll sell off my stock. Oops, and I accidentally sold it all. Bye, people. Saddle somebody else with the problem when it continues to collapse. CNN is dying faster than Facebook is. That's quite something. The other part of it, though, is this. All of the growth of any cable network at this point that you see is cannibalistic. It's not, hey, we're growing the cable audience. That's shrinking, so that can't be the result. So when MSNBC slaughters CNN in the ratings and hatchets them out of several main positions, it doesn't mean that MSNBC is doing well. It just means that it's doing less bad than CNN. It has parasitized some of the remaining shrinking pool of audience for itself. It's like if you had a small lake, and it's going to go extinct. It's going to stop existing or just be little more than a muddy puddle at some point. But there are fish in it, and they're territorial because their territory is shrinking. Just because one of those populations of fish manages to expand into it doesn't expand the size of the pond, it just expands the area of the shrinking pond that they control. They can drive all the others to extinction. It's not going to prevent them from eventually dying too. That's what you've got on cable. Meanwhile, on the internet, it's like a massive ocean and it's growing all the time. It's like eating away at its own shorelines and expanding, getting deeper and deeper inexplicably. That's the internet. CNN wants in on that. But CNN ultimately is little more than one little steamship on a major ocean. That's the problem of the old guard. They waited so long to really be active online. They've got pundits that have, a substantial Twitter presence. They've got people that maybe they have a podcast. Like I think Sean Hannity has a podcast. At some point, his podcast will probably pull in more viewers than his show on Fox. Why would even at that point want to be on cable? He'll be like, yeah, this is basically a throwaway. You can cut my hours and my pay. That's okay. I'm getting more in subscriptions on a fucking podcast. It's going to happen too. There's going to be that funny flipping point at which I'll tell you what ultimately probably kills off cable. or at least kills off its ability to be dynamic within news and most forms of analysis and entertainment and education. What will kill them off is when the first major pundit realizes that if they're just tech savvy, or they have a couple tech savvy staff to help them pretend to be tech savvy, they can actually make more money because they'll have less overhead. They can go anywhere they want, work from home, they can work 5 hours a week and no problem because, they're already famous. When they realize that they can do a 2-a-week podcast on politics for a few hours and make almost as much money as they're already making if they branch out onto various tech platforms. That will eventually happen. It will kill off cable because the old recognizable pundits, like the Bill O'Reilly class, the Rachel Maddow, the Anderson Coopers, once those people are either dead and there's no one really to replace them, the new crop of pundits is just simply not as interesting. They weren't around in the 80s and 90s. They started in the 2000s usually. When they die, or when they quit, or when they go online, it's going to be the death knell of these big networks. They're not going to be able to compete with a YouTuber who's already got millions of fans. It's not going to happen. Therefore, people who are establishing themselves, not just on major tech, but also, I would say, I'm telling you, if you don't have a Minds account, if you're not on Gab, if you're not using BitChute, if you're not also using Maker Support or some secondary fundraising platform because of the problems with big tech fundraising, you're doing something wrong. You're certainly not setting yourself up to survive the next paradigm shift. You'll be fine for maybe 10, 15 years. It's great. Okay, clap for you. Don't end up like the pundits from the 90s and 2000s are ending up right now, falling left and right. At what point are these major networks in their throes of agony at fundraising? At what point are they going to be hemorrhaged by their parent companies because they're no longer profitable? That would kill them off really fast. At what point are some of these mainstream pundits, to say, well, I want a $5 million raise this year. We're sorry, Mr. O'Reilly, we can't do that. Well, I want $7 million bonus because, I've got the primetime slot. I'm sorry, Miss Maddow, that's impossible. We don't have the money. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to talk to other networks. Those other networks aren't going to be able to offer them much. They'll just be stealing each other's pundits at some point. That'll be funny. It's like Megyn Kelly there. When she leaves Fox, she goes to another network. Her show collapses completely. Yeah, Fox has problems. So does her new shtick. She's just sitting there dancing with Ellen. When you start dancing with Ellen DeGeneres, you know that your career has tanked. Sorry, but that's just the way that it works. I'm surprised that anyone wants to go on her meager show. Yeah. Oh, they get good ratings. Yes, they've got a very catered to niche soccer mom audience that I think they're going for demographically. Online, you don't have to do that. The whole world is basically using the internet. Cable is insular and partitioned in a hard sense from channel to channel. It's not like there's the cable channel and here's okay, first up next is Rachel Maddow, then we have a documentary on dogs, and then we have this, that, and the other. That's not the way they work. They have compartmentalized themselves. A handful of companies own all of those sub-networks, that's true, but it's still compartmentalized and centralized. But I, as a YouTuber, I can upload anything I want. Like if I want to make a documentary about, the pine needles of Vermont, I can do that, slap it on a channel that most of the time it's about politics, my books, some gardening, and a few other topics. The occult. I don't have to stick to a certain number of topics. Another problem is that these pundits, they're classically trained in punditry, which means, hey, I look pretty for the camera, wear the suit, I sit at this desk, and I say what the script tells me to say. I'm good at having a semi-interpersonal conversation with other human beings. That's great. There are also a million people on YouTube who can do that. There are small YouTubers conducting interviews and stuff, and then they're pretty professional. You give them a modern studio design, it would look basically the same. You give them the suit and rent the fucking suit, they can do the same interview that a Maddow can pull off. Or an Anderson Cooper. It'll be just as good. There is no special thing that makes these pundits better. In fact, mostly they're worse because they're paid to lie oftentimes. So I'm happy that CNN is dying off. To the point, here's the funny part. MSNBC is now, more trusted than CNN by people. It's still a very low number, but they've destroyed CNN. CNN for a very long time was basically the main Fox competitor. Now it's MSNBC, which used to be sort of the progressive, the further left network, and CNN sort of prided itself in being that stuffy neoliberal network. Then they flipped around, and CNN went further left because of the anti-Trump phenomenon. I guess they were hedging their bets. that their cable network would succeed because they happen to talk down to Trump the most. Well, that's great. You see, the problem is you got 4 major networks doing that, and you're all sharing a minority of the population that actually appreciates nonstop coverage of Trump, wiped his nose the wrong way. Trump likes his steak the wrong way. Trump eats too much junk food. Trump hired Russian hookers to piss on a hotel bed that the Obamas had slept in. All of this nonsense, pandering to the lowest common denominator sort of thought within the population. You can't even outcompete clickbaiters on YouTube on that token. Why do you think that they're constantly saying that there's a problem with misinfo on YouTube? It's not because I don't even think it's so much they're politically worried. I think it's more fiscally worried. Simply the fact that if somebody wants to be excited and titillated by like morbidity or intrigue or weird conspiratorial stuff, then you can go watch CNN. You can go talk to some YouTuber. They'll go online and they'll get the stuff there. It's so much more interesting, and it's faster. You can choose more about it. It's more easily customized, sort of tailored to your desires as an audience, because it's so much less centralized, totally decentralized on the internet for the most part as far as content. And you can interact with people, other people with similar interests, and with content creators, people who upload content, make websites or whatever they do. You can actually talk to them. It's not like, good luck getting a sit-down conversation with Anderson Cooper. He's not going to give you the time of day. He'll say, oh, thank you for being a fan, shake your hand and walk off. That's about all you're going to get from him. That's all you're going to get. He doesn't have enough time. His time is too valuable. He needs to go make another $10 million or whatever. So CNN dying is great fun. Yeah, people are saying, CNN, I think, earlier this year, they were crowing about, no, we're doing perfectly fine in the post-Trump era, despite the fact that we just ramble about Trump all the time. Our strategy's working. Nope, actually, you've lost 23% of your total daytime viewers over that same period. I would think that's pretty concerning. No wonder you have less money to pump into making your shitty propaganda online. Like, how many people have YouTube streaming bundle, and of those people, how many of those people ever watch CNN on it? It's probably like 10 people. They have to pay through the nose for that too. They could have, for free, simply built up a good presence and a second sort of structure on YouTube. They didn't think to do that. Now it's kind of too late. They've been totally outflanked by everybody else who does politics. They're not going to recover from that. I'm telling you that the future of mass media, of human communication, is less centralized, it's more libertarian in form, and less corporatistic. It's inevitably going to be less like a highly centralized cable situation. It's too boring, and you have too small a talent pool. If you've got 100 million people making content, trust me, somebody among that group has some significant talent, can draw in a significant audience. Yeah, you have dead weight everywhere, but it doesn't really matter. It's not going to ultimately affect the viability of the platform. In fact, it makes it more of a living, breathing,